Hello and welcome everybody to our Wednesday Starpeace Talk. I am RozyGlow and I am delighted to introduce the wonderful Meaghan today, who is here as a soul sister, someone I have spent a year getting to know and really appreciating what she is bringing to this world. So just to set the scene before I pass over to introduce this beautiful soul who is a starseed. And really, you know, a big advocate of celebrating neurodivergence, neurodiversity, and really helping us to kind of rewire our concept of success and rewire our concept of ourselves so that we can really have the most impact in this world. I am a soul activator myself, a channel of divine grace. And I work with awakening starseeds to basically help them to fulfill their dreams by overcoming their early life programming. And you'll see there's a lot of similarities here in some of the language that Meaghan's going to use and I use. And all I'll say is if you're on the YouTube channel, please do subscribe, hit the notifications tab, and there is a whole like see all bit that you need to tap now so that you can see all the videos that we produce. We're here to seed star peace into the collective narrative of humanity. And if you're like, what's star peace? Just remember what Star Wars is. We all know what Star Wars is. So it's the opposite of that. It's coming into this space of harmony, of celebrating all the different ways that we can show up in this world, in this galaxy, in this universe, without needing to control, without needing to divide, without needing to create conflict. So we're creating unity. That's what this is all about. And on that basis, I'm going to hand over and say, Meaghan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you so much, RozyGlow, for that amazing introduction. I love your work. I'm so excited to be here today. And as you said, I'm Meaghan. I am a jeweler. I'm an entrepreneur, a business consultant and strategist. But moreover that, I'm also a mentor and a neuro coach and a transformation specialist. So I'm here to help people up-level their ways of being, their higher levels of consciousness, and increase their human potential so they can innovate at their highest levels of themselves and create revolutionary change while we're here on this planet. So thank you so much for having me.
Just love that, because that's what this is all about. Revolutionary, evolutionary, totally stratospheric shifts in consciousness, right? And before we go into that, you are wearing some of your own jewelry today, aren't you?
I am actually, and these are my angel wing earrings. This is pure silver and with a little rose with a pink sapphire in there. So
well, we'll make sure we put a link to your jewelry in the text box, obviously. And I know some may come across this in our Starpeace Facebook group, maybe on YouTube, but either way, you are in the right place. If you haven't yet joined our Facebook group, please do follow the link and do that, because we are a growing community and we are purposefully using the book of the face to shift the narrative, which is why I have created a group there. And of course on YouTube as well, this is a space where we are being given the opportunity to see truths in the collective. And you know when you are coming across a truth because it really resonates. There's something in you that just goes and you know that's meant for you, right? So we open our hearts, we open our minds, and we're bringing our soul consciousness through in this conversation. And we were having a chat before anyway. I mean, we've had quite a few chats because we like talking to each other, but like discovering more about Meaghan's work has been like so inspiring. And, you know, just to sort of take things straight away to the Institute for Neurobrilliance, because this is something that you have co-created, I would say, with your soul consciousness. Do you want to let us know a bit about that? And we'll speak specifically to leadership and what it means to lead in the new earth paradigm, because that's exactly what you are here on this earth to do, I believe, to support leaders to do this in a completely innovative way. So over to you.
Yes, thank you. Absolutely. In my opinion, we are here to create new systems that work for everyone, not we're escaping and exiting these systems that don't work for everyone. They only work for a certain few, the top 1% of people on the earth. And so part of my work in the Institute for Neurobrilliance is a system. It's based on what's called the science of systems, which is a science that's been around since the 50s. And essentially, it's there are 3 parts to this system, and they all have to work together in order for the outcome to be achieved. And the outcome is predictable, and it's the same for everyone. And that outcome is success, it's creativity, innovation, the flow of ideas. And part of the 3 parts of that system are neurohealth, creative enterprise, and self-actualized intelligence. And so, like I said, they all have to work together in order to bring prosperity for all, is essentially what it's meant to do, instead of success and prosperity and like high vibrational living and all of these things being only accessible to a very few of us. So it's about creating systems.
Is this something you'd love to see taught in schools, for example, in the future? Like, is this like,
yes, actually, I have thought about that many times, especially because I have a young son. He's 13, and I did homeschool him for a couple of years. I do have concerns about the public education system, because, well, for one, they only teach to the left side of the brain. And we are coded and we are designed to be whole brain individuals. And that's why I love neuroscience and Neurobrilliance, right? Because it's whole brain activation. We have like 90 million neural wiring, like connections, possibilities in our brain. And we have so much neural wiring that it could wrap around the earth 4 times. Wow. And yet our public education system's only teaching to the left-hand side of the brain for all those years, and it's about memorization and testing and all, there's just so much more available to increase our human potential. And so the answer to that would be yes. Short answer, yes, I would be willing and wanting to bring this to schools. I have thought about that before. Yeah.
I love that you're speaking to this first and foremost, because I think one of the biggest questions in school systems is this idea when we're faced with this either or choice. Either I pull my child out of the system and home educate them, or we're dealing with state school education, or we need to have the funds available to have some kind of private school education. And I've been really lucky in that I've had state school education in England and in Greece and Australia. I've had international education in Singapore, and I've had private independent education in the UK as well as going to uni. So I've kind of had a really diverse education background. And honestly, we are like taught to the socio-economic status that we are expected to stay with, right? Which is very much like a Brave New World, Aldous Huxley, if anyone remembers that book, and being programmed to be happy where we're at, right, and to look down on anything other than us as well. But the biggest argument people have for school is, oh, you need to socialize your child. If you don't send them and socialize them, they're going to have problems. And then the question I ask is like, socialize to what? To behave in an abominable way, to be bullied or to bully, like to judge, to criticize, to condemn, like all of that shit, right? So let's take this. Do you want me to actually share screen and share your webpage so we can talk a bit about that, so people can actually see the visual?
Sure.
Because I think that could be really cool. And
yeah, let's do that.
We can stay on topic because we could go everywhere. And I think this is something for everyone to know. Like Meaghan is like just a beautiful combination of both creative and incredibly like switched on intellectually as well. And I think, when I see that you are both a jeweler and you're doing all this, wonderful stuff. And like, even before we got on, I was like, I had to wear white today. I knew I had to wear white, and you jump on and you're wearing white. And then we had this conversation. You're like, I was going to wear black. I was like, well, look, that's underneath. It's just there, like the connectedness of, well, I'd love you to speak about the mind and the brain and how the two relate to each other, because I think often that concept is not really fully understood. But here's your diagram with these 3 areas, these 3 pillars. Tell me where you want to go with this. Do you want to explain a little bit about each one of them?
Yeah, well, where I'll start though is I love how you talked about, the intellectual side of things, because honestly, I didn't even know how intelligent I was. I just kept working and kept working and kept building and creating and innovating. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, I'm brilliant. It was just like this revelation to me. And so my point is that intelligence can be built. And that's what part of this system is all about, especially that self-actualized intelligence. It's about education and information and those higher levels of consciousness and emotional intelligence too, and that pursuit of greatness, because that's where I started. I just wanted to be great for myself first. That was always that drive to experience my own greatness. And that's what self-actualized intelligence part is about. It's about learning and the knowledge and the implementation, and what you're doing at the same time is you're opening new neural pathways in your brain, and that those can be created on purpose. So we can create new neurons, brain cells, and we can create new neural pathways in the directions that we want them to go. So that's kind of like mental, mind mapping. And so that's why I love talking about intelligence so much, because it can be built. And then you said something else that I was gonna, the brain and the mind. Yeah. So the mind uses the brain to design itself, to create itself, to expand itself, right? And that's why I love neuroscience so much. Because with that whole brain activation I was talking about, right? There's just so much more available to us. We don't even know. We have no idea what is available to us in our mind, in our brain. And so I just love talking about that. But so this is a system based on what's called the science of systems. And so anyone can go create their own system, by the way. You can learn about science system. Well, it's called system science or the science of systems. And there's this man named Shiva Ayudare, who was the inventor of email, and you can go and take his course. Now he's like a scientist and a doctor. He went to MIT. He has his own movement in the world, but he teaches you how to create your own system, and that's how I learned how to do this. And it's based on these parts have to be always integrated, otherwise the result won't be the same, right? So it's a predictable system based on what you put into it. And my system is neuro health, right? So you can use the concept of the science of neuroplasticity, and to see how your brain is operating, essentially. And then if it's not operating optimally for you, that can be changed, and it can be changed rather easily. And then creative enterprise is that, business and entrepreneurship and the flow of ideas and forward movement, essentially, is always forward movement, is that up leveling, is that level of creativity and innovating and that revolutionary change that leaders like ourselves are bringing into the world, right? So that's basis of the system.
Well, we're going to go to neuroplasticity, because I think that would be really helpful for people if they're not so new, if they're not so familiar with the term, what that actually is. Because just reflecting on our common ground, one of the things I used to teach a lot was baby yoga, right? So I used to teach a lot of pregnancy yoga, a lot of baby yoga, obviously a lot of birth yoga and fertility yoga too. But when I used to teach the sort of brain development elements of the baby yoga, I remember we used to say, it's really use it or lose it, in terms of, what neuro pathways become our norm as we get older. Because from memory, in the first year of life, the way that the brain develops is faster than any computer known to man. Although I would challenge, does that mean quantum computers as well? Because that would be quite interesting, because it was a while ago since I taught these sessions. And yeah, just how amazing it is that babies are really learning through observation, and also the theta brainwaves and the delta brainwaves, which are the main brainwaves in early life, in utero, first 7 years of life, right? And then things shift as they get older. But this idea of neuro health and neuroplasticity is really around us being able, like you say, we're not stuck, right? We're not stuck with a legacy and that's it. Things can shift. Do you want to add anything else to that?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, we've kind of been taught that, when our brain cells die, that's all there is, like those ones are gone. But that's actually the proven that that's actually not true, that we are creating new brain cells, and that our neurons can be changed. So we can actually change them so that they don't light up the same way anymore. So if you're experiencing basic, stuckness, for example, that can be changed. So science has given us and proven that we can shift things immediately now. Without having to work, kind of like that endless mindset work. Some of us experience for decades, even trying to, recover from trauma and heal our lives, things like that. Neuroplasticity is essentially that, we can use the brain and change our neurons and shift our neural pathways to accomplish anything, to be whoever we want to be, right? To change our belief systems. It's really, really fascinating science. Like the science of epigenetics, for example, which is a science in the last 10 years, they've proven that we inherit particular genes. So maybe it's anxiety, maybe, women in particular have a fear of being seen. We have a fear of failing. We don't feel good enough. Those kinds of things are passed down through generations, and we can shift them now, because our neurons can be, the gene expression can be turned off, and the neurons can be shifted so they don't light up the same way anymore.
This really ties in with my big passion for, transgenerational trauma, like how things pass from one generation to the next. And when I'm talking from a soul perspective, I'll say, look, you have bloodline memories and soul memories. So when a star seed, and I'm speaking to the star seeds because this is what starpeace is all about, incarnate into that physical, the first fusion of the cell of, the sperm and the egg, right? There's this sense that they know that the whole point of a star seed that's choosing to come in from a higher frequency to a lower density frequency is that we will activate. We've got a timer to activate and several activation points to remember why we're here. But what can end up happening is through incarnating into the physical bloodlines in utero, because obviously, the way our brain develops, the way our physiology develops depends very much on how our mother perceives the world around her. Is it threatening? Is it safe? Does she feel supported? Does she feel like she's got to fight to survive, right? All that kind of stuff will really play a big part. And I know we've talked about this in the past to some great length, but ultimately, what can end up happening is we've come in with a great idea, but getting into the physical body that we incarnate into and absorbing all of this stuff, which is no one's fault, by the way, because our mum learned from her mum, who learned from her mum, who learned from her mum. We know we can go back 14 generations in terms of epigenetic studies that have already been done. So it's like, okay, there is something here. We don't want to keep repeating this if there's something there that we don't want to keep carrying forward. But from the perspective of a starseed, is we can really buy into those family stories, the trauma, the gene expression, if you like, and it can get to the point that essentially we buy more into the victim story we've inherited, that ironically we've come here to clear. then actually using it as the activation of our self-mastery, which we already have from previous incarnations. I know some of you will really hear that, and others it will be like, what is she talking about? Don't worry about that. It's just helping to differentiate, if you like, how we come past this. And the reason I'm saying it is, in my work, the biggest thing I've seen in terms of whether trauma is overcome or not, and I'm curious about your take on this, is whether we are really willing to let that old trauma story go, whether we keep it alive or whether we actually are willing to let it go every time it shows up. One of the weird sort of complications here, which I call misplaced loyalty, is even if we came from really abusive families, even if we were given very little love, it's like an animal imprinting with its owner that will keep coming back and bizarrely be loyal to that conditioning, even though that conditioning has massively limited us. What do you want to share on that?
Well, I feel like, yes, especially if you're the younger childhood years, if you're that the trauma from childhood, and whether, well, it could be childhood trauma, it could also be epigenetic trauma that we're experiencing. I feel like we go through different times with that trauma. So yes, there are parts of us that want to stay stuck in that victimhood, but I don't believe that that's our fault. There's this amazing book that Napoleon Hill wrote called Outwitting the Devil, and he talks about this thing called a hypnotic rhythm. And when you're in trauma states and experiencing trauma, especially in your childhood, and you're also you're in the vibration of your mother, your parents, and also that epigenetic line, it sometimes feels impossible to get out of that hypnotic rhythm, because that's right. Like, I just think of it as this like funnel, like a tornado funnel, kind of, when he explains that hypnotic rhythm. And for a long time, I was just like, that book, by the way, is amazing. And it's kind of mind blowing. And for me, I was like, okay, I have to create a new hypnotic rhythm. And what does that mean for me? Like, I want to feel safe in the world. I want to feel supported. That's feeling safe in the world. I feel that has been was one of my biggest challenges. Feeling safe in the world and being seen, fitting in. I didn't feel like I belonged here. I felt like I was from another planet. I thought I was a mistake. But all of those things, yes, right? All of those things can be changed, and can be changed immediately. But yes, so I think we all have our own personal journey with trauma and getting out of that, that victimhood. And it can be harder for some than others, especially if you have longer term trauma. But it is science and the innovators have given us modalities and tools and knowledge on how to overcome that, and it doesn't take decades, it doesn't take years anymore. It actually can happen in minutes. And yeah, so
yeah, no, I remember we were talking before. I feel like this is a really important thing to be talking about, because it's one, I don't think it's anyone's fault either. And I think this is really important to remember, that we are moving well beyond blame, right? We're not interested in blame. And we can say that ultimately the way the pop culture still is presently, and the way the 3D world is, it's actually constantly triggering trauma stories, right? The way that the media operates, again, not a judgment, because this is just the consciousness, right, of the collective, right? So the way it's showing presently is that most of what we're exposed to through our 5 senses, certainly what we watch, what we listen to, what we even what we smell to a degree because of the pollution in the air, but like what we say, what we listen to, what we read, what we tune into, generally is triggering that trauma, right? It's not so much supporting us to see that actually it can be overcome. The fact that you're here and you're saying it can be done in minutes is absolutely spot on, right? And we also know that someone needs to be ready to drop a story in order for that to be the case. So I love the simplicity of hearing, it's simple, but not easy. Sometimes we can really differentiate between the two things, that something is simple to do, but it's the repetition of making that choice again and again to flip something around that normally we're used to really seeing in a different way. And I think what I've understood from us talking about the work that you do is that you can literally support someone to turn off a gene, right? To change the gene expression. Do you want to explain it a little bit rather than me doing it in a way?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I absolutely agree with everything you just said too, because the systems of the world, they don't just, they do trigger the trauma, but they also create it, right?
Yeah.
So that's why creating new systems and new innovations is so important, because there is a whole nother way of being and experiencing life in this world, and it's beyond not belonging and not feeling like you were meant to be here and those kinds of things, because we absolutely are. So I am a facilitator of a modality called Creatrix, that was innovated by an absolutely brilliant and beautiful woman in Australia. And it's based on the science of epigenetics, which they have proven that genes that are expressing themselves in certain ways, so like anxiety or not wanting to be seen, for example. This is one of my favorite examples of this, and that's how many millions of women were killed because they thought they were witches, right? So let's say a daughter sees her mother being taken away, and ultimately she never sees her again. She learns that she needs to hide. And then she passes that gene down through generations. And it's no wonder that so many women are afraid to be seen and feel like they need to hide. That's a perfect example of gene expression. And they've proven that those genes can be turned off. And so this modality does that. So it does a couple of different things. It heals epigenetic trauma. It also rewires your neurons so they can't light up the same way. So if you have a belief, for example, that you have like wealth block or any kind of wealth limiting beliefs around wealth or anything like that, those can be rewired permanently. So the work is permanent, so you can't actually go backwards. It's all forward movement, right? It's only forward movement, and your neurons can't light up the same way that they used to, and so your entire operating system of your brain is different, and so your behavior changes, your choices change, and the experiences that come into your life also change because you're changing your whole vibration. And you're accessing those higher levels of consciousness, and you're healing all of, this is the time we are meant to be here to heal those epigenetic lines, to drop into our soul work, our purpose work. I knew when I was young, I think I was like 16 maybe when this happened, but I received a download that I was going to be a part of something really, really big in my lifetime. And I absolutely believe that that's happening now.
Damn right. I'm so glad you talked about the invisibility thing, because I think this whole concept at the moment of the feminine rising is huge, right? And there's a term called throwing the baby out with the bathwater, which I'm sure you understand. But it's like, when I think about, when it's not even thinking about, seeing so many women have this block of being visible, of speaking up, of being scared to share their truth. When you explain it the way you did, it actually didn't pay, to be honest. It didn't pay to share your truth. It didn't pay to do any of the stuff that now we are saying now is the time. And this is part of this trauma story, is to remember that trauma that we've inherited, whether it's epigenetic, whether it's a self-experienced situation, it's important to remember you've already been through that pain, or your ancestors have already been through it. That's done. We're in a whole new time now, like from a starseed perspective. And some of you may be familiar with Barbara Masiniak's work. She wrote the Pleiadian Agenda and a lot of other books that were channeled from the Pleiadians. I loved these in my 20s. Like, they really helped me to awaken. And, part of the whole deal with I can't remember why I'm saying that now, but part of the whole deal of this, if that was it, is that we've come for the cosmic party now. We've come here for this brilliant, phenomenal event that's actually a 20-year period from 2012 to 32, more or less, where we are literally leaving the age of Pisces behind, moving into the age of Aquarius, and actually heralding the 1,000 years of peace on earth that we have been promised. But part of what is really important for our future development is we have to let go of the blame story, right? And actually just go, there's a load of mess to clear up. That's okay. We've got the tools. There are so many tools, right, to clear this mess up. Go to who you resonate with. Go to where you are at your level now, that you can stretch yourself to the next level to support you, because it doesn't stop. I haven't stopped growing. You haven't stopped growing. It's a, where can I go next? And interestingly, I don't know how you feel about this, Meaghan, but in my journey, like when all my personal goals had been achieved, right? When I'd got the man that I wanted, I'd got the house, I'd got the good relationship with my daughter, I'd shifted my relationship with myself, I'd had my first 10K month, my first 10K week, my 20K day, my whatever was the benchmark of success. There then came a point, and this is what I'm speaking about, this in relation to the creative enterprise bit, right? Where I wasn't in survival mode anymore. And when you have been wired to basically be motivated by fear, and you are no longer motivated by fear anymore because you feel safe in this world, right? And your needs have been met. What can happen, and I've not heard anyone say this, so I'm speaking to it now, is you can kind of plateau a little bit and go a bit, meh, what now? I've got it all. I'm not striving for it anymore. And it's almost like in labor, I love talking about labor, sorry, but when you get to the end of the first stage, so oxytocin and adrenaline, we know this, are antagonists in terms of hormones, right? Oxytocin allows the labor to progress. Adrenaline puts the brakes on the labor. We're not safe, right? So I'm talking about giving birth. But it's not either or the whole time, right? You want to be oxytocin dominant, but in early first stage labor and later first stage labor, you need these little pushes of adrenaline to get you to the next stage. So there is this drive that propels you, whether it's a I must act now or whatever, to get you to the point that you're right at the top, when basically your uterus has stopped contracting at the top to open the bottom bit, and it's now going to start pushing the baby down, right? And what happens is you have a little shot of adrenaline just before that pushing stage starts, just to get you into position, because the likelihood is for 10, for however many hours you've been going, I'm so tired, I can't birth this baby, I'm going to have to give up. And then you're like, ugh, energy is there. And the point is you have those little drives to push you forward, but you're shifting gear. So that shifting gear from contracting to stretch, and then this plateau before the main event happens, which is boom, this urge to bear down and birth this baby, project, relationship, idea, whatever it is out into this world happens. And this was the analogy I came to, was like, wow, I'm no longer motivated by fear. So what am I going to be motivated by? Passion. What's going to drive me? Because actually, if you're not struggling for money anymore, if you're not desperate for love anymore, if all those things have been taken away, they're dealt with, are you just going to sit on your ass all day and do nothing? Are you just going to get drunk every day? Are you actually not going to bother with your soul mission? This can really run in the background of a lot of our heads, right? And with creative enterprise, a bit like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you're in survival mode, fear driven, the first thing is to get out of that state, right? Because you have to go up in layers to get to the point where, in the time we've known each other, how long ago did you birth this?
The Institute for Neurobrilliance, gosh, it's probably maybe 5 months ago, but it's something that I have been working towards for, well, years, but it's, this is the highest level of my innovation that I've been working on, I would say, for 15 years, but ultimately really for like the last year and a half.
Which is the length of time we've known each other,
right?
So yes. You've birthed this right? It's out in the world. For me, what came up in the time that we got to know each other was starpeace. Like this was the, I'm no longer surviving, right? What's my stratospheric gift to this world, this stratospheric shift, right? And this is yours. And it's like, wow, like I want to just scroll down a little bit, because you've done it in nice big writing, which I love. I just feel it's important for people to get this sense, because those of you who are leaders of the New Earth paradigm, you need to know about this, okay? And you need to know about Meaghan, because, you know, we were talking about how I like to work with people longer term. Meaghan's like, she gets in there, she gets the job done, she gets out, right? Like that's more the way that you work. Whereas I will work with someone for 6 months, a year, 18 months, however long it takes, so that they can see and feel confident those shifts have landed and they're just growing and growing. But we feel like we kind of meet people at slightly different stages of wherever they're at, right? And we both have different areas of our work in terms of one-to-one and group and all the other things we do. But this is, I would say, as I read it, it was like, okay, so the innovative leaders, the New Earth, the Paradise Earth pioneers is what I call the architects of the New Earth, right? And what's interesting is that the old systems of leadership are not what the new world is based on, right? Because you talk, and we're going to touch on it a bit today, but we're going to have another session about it, about money, about prosperity for all, and what that actually looks like. And you know, there's a lot of women stepping forward right now, my beautiful soul friends, that are stepping into areas that were more traditionally male, you know, in the way that we have been in the patriarchal time, but really owning their intellectual mastery, their cognition, their capacity to go and bring it all together. And that's what I'm seeing here. And I love that you've come up with Neurobrilliance, because we talk about diversity. We you know, what are the other terms that are used for? It used to be mental health, right? You've got that there, and you called it neuro health. I mean, what are other terms that we currently have that maybe
well,
aren't?
I think we talked about, you know, neurodivergence, which I do like neurodiversity more than I like neurodivergence, but I love the word divergent. Just kind of has this like badass connotation to it. But you know, I am neurodivergent. I have Asperger's. I also have ADHD, and I had to overcome a lot, you know, childhood trauma, and also that went through my whole entire life. And well, but I wanted to say to you though, when you were talking about fear, because fear seizes the higher level thinking mind, the higher level thinking brain. And when we do overcome that, which now can happen immediately, but you know, people like us, before these tools and modalities were created, we did spend years overcoming fear, right? Overcoming that fear of being seen, fear of failing, and all of those things. And those, you know, we have these tools that can accomplish that immediately. I forgot what I was going to say too. You did that earlier. I always do that. It happens to me all the time. But I think what I was going to say was about the intellectual part. Well, with the whole neurodivergence thing, is that, you know, there are symptoms of neurodivergence that can be turned into superpowers.
Yeah.
And turn into characteristics, right? So that all of that fear, the anxiety, the depression, the not fitting into the world, the not belonging, the, you know, all of those things. And there's countless ways that's, you know, individually we can experience those things. But those were my particular things. I didn't feel like I belonged here on this planet. I thought it was a mistake. Right. And they do. And the funny thing is, before I found out that I had Asperger's, I was like, I'm a starseed. I'm definitely a starseed. I was put here for a reason, but I don't know what that is. I'm from another planet. Like, I just did not feel like I belonged here at all. And once I healed that, that's when I was like, I do belong here. I absolutely, like, those things, those symptoms can be reversed, like taken away completely, so that you can step into the what I call neurobrilliance, right? So they're not symptoms anymore.
Yeah.
They're characteristics of who we are. Those are our superpowers. That's that intelligence, and that this software system, which is our brain, can be, I call it 1000x your human potential. That's what I call my particular working with me. So Creatrix is a modality that I facilitate. That's where that immediate stuff happens. And then 1000x your potential, human potential, is where I take this system and I expand your entire operating system, which is your brain, up level it 1,000 times, so that what you're talking about, that kind of those connections are just happening. And then all of a sudden the creativity, the flow of ideas, the innovation, the revolutionary change, it's just happening. It's just happening. So I think I went on a tangent there, but hopefully I came back.
It's a beautiful tangent, because we were talking, like, one of the things I talk about a lot in the like, I talk about the fear matrix to the divine matrix upgrade, and I also talk about compassion and consciousness as two different elements, if you like, of the right and the left hemisphere of the brain, if you like, when we're fully active. So I've seen a massive explosion in consciousness shifting tools, but they don't all include making a connection with your soul, or dropping from the head, the thinking space, into creating safety in the body, and then accessing the portal of the heart where your soul can enter into. And that's my passion area. That's what I'm like really excited about, is working with those who are already really activated. They're super conscious in terms of their capacity to, like you say, upgrade the platform, the mind. Like, us talking has just been amazing. And then to really bring that soul-led approach in and see what happens. And in my world, it will always relate back to that time in the womb, when this original connection between the soul self and the human self kind of built. And I know we're both on the same page with epigenetics. People see me bring this book out a lot, but this changed my life, because it was about attracting the love I wanted, and literally changing from attracting Mr. Wrong all the time, Mr. Disinterested, Mr. Unavailable, to having who I consider to be the best husband in the universe, right? And my sacred union. But there's another book which I don't know if you know about, but this is called ET 101, and this is a big inspiration for the star, like what I'm going to be bringing through in terms of the starpeace manifesto, etc. Because in this, it's a really good fun. I think you'd really enjoy it, because this is part of that. When I say, oh, you're a starseed, we're constantly looking for labels to define ourselves, right? But when you actually accept on a consciousness level that there are those on this earth that have incarnated, who dwell as their home in other constellations, in other galaxies that are already beyond conflict and war, right? And they have come here to teach those ways to those who are already on this earth, so then it can, move down through the champagne glasses, as it were. Then that's why I will go, you're a starseed, because it's recognizing that there's nothing wrong with you if you find that you're here on this earth and you don't feel like you belong. Absolutely, you can switch the gene off, and that's great, and feel like you belong. But knowing that it's one level, it will express it as is a neuro pathway, but on a soul level, there's a whole other story behind that as well. And it's allowing it all to coexist, because we're moving beyond duality, beyond right, wrong, everything else. And I could bang on, but what I'd love us to get to is, when we say here, the Institute for Neurobrilliance is a system of success for aspiring visionary leaders to bring forth their highest level of human potential, greatness, and revolutionary innovation. Take a breath, everyone. And then drop down, and we go into, it is an intelligent system based on the science of systems, which people can look up if they want to. Now, this was the bit that got me, that I was really like, please talk to us about this so I can understand a bit more. An intelligent system makes decisions on what it will receive in order to produce a specific outcome. Unpack that for me.
Yeah, so that means what is going into the system to produce that predictable result, which for me is prosperity, success, the flow of ideas, right? So that's why I chose neurohealth, create enterprise and self-actualized intelligence as my parts of the system, because that's what's going into the system. That's what the system is receiving, right? And then you can always evaluate. So if like this, if you're not getting the outcome that you're meant to be getting, then you look at the parts of the system and what's going in. So, right, like the neuro health, which is how your brain is operating, your brain health, neuroplasticity, whole brain activation, that the education, the information, sound money, intelligence, and then the creative enterprise, which is, innovation, business, entrepreneurship, creativity. That's what the system's receiving, are all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
If it's not producing the result that you want, then you go back and you look at what the system is receiving and you can change it. And see where it's not working. So you can apply this to anything. Like one of my favorite things to talk about is the money and the financial system, the global financial system. If you were to actually understand how that system works, you will be able to determine that it only works for a very few people, right? So that's what that means. So that system is receiving things. Fractional reserve lending, fiat currency, all of those, the world reserve currency, which is currently the US dollar. Those are the things that the system is receiving in order to get a result, which is that only a very few people actually prosper in that system, right? So this system is receiving everything I just mentioned in order to get a predictable result, which is prosperity for all that go through that system.
So this system is receiving creative enterprise, neuro health, and self-actualized intelligence in order to create prosperity for all, right?
Yes.
So that's what my brain needed to get around. So can you bring this just so that I want to talk about fiat economy in a minute, because I think it's so important if people haven't touched on that already to know about it, and how we can kind of navigate through the scare stories of the economic system crashing and actually be intelligent about how to prosper through these challenging times, these times of change, and not be motivated all the time by what if, but actually what can I do? What's going to benefit me for the future? What's going to benefit my family? How can I make the most of what I've got now? And how can I separate fact from fiction? Because I think one of the hardest things for people to really accept, but it's an essential thing to accept in order to move on, is what we're told isn't necessarily true, right? Or it's true from a very limited perspective, right? And by that I mean the terrestrial mainstream kind of information that gets pumped into everyone's consciousness, right? So you've done a lot of looking under the surface. You've done a lot of exploring, taking things, when I say down the rabbit hole, a lot of people say follow the money, right? But it's like the following through the trail and going, well, what is this about? What is this about? And what we're shown on the surface in terms of, the way the economy is portrayed, the way global issues are portrayed, I think we're on the same page when we say we can see the setup, right? When you can see the setup, you can see the setup. But until you see the setup, you're in that program, right?
Right.
Do you want to say anything to that before I move on?
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, most of what we learn is not true. And going down the rabbit hole, another way of saying that is independent research or due diligence. One of my superpowers, because I have Asperger's, I have this insatiable need to understand how things work and to find truth. And so I'm an independent researcher. I have been for many, many, many years. And so one of the most beneficial things that people can do is understand how our global financial system actually works, and to understand money. And because I'm a jeweler, and this happened to me inadvertently, because I'm a jeweler, I started learning about the metal markets, right? I started learning about money, or I mean, sorry, the metals, gold and silver, and how that they've been used for 5,000 years as money, because they are money, they're currencies, and they are commodities, especially silver, because silver is used in so many industrial, in ways. And so once you understand money and what it actually is, and there's so many ways you can go learn about this. There's Robert Kiyosaki. He was one of the Rich Dad Poor Dad books, amazing education. This is the self-actualized intelligence, right? This is about education and knowledge and information. One of his partners, Mike Maloney, has an entire series that you can watch on YouTube that explains the history of money, how our global financial system works, how the US dollar is the world's reserve currency, what that means. And we are actually in the process of losing that status currently. Now, this is a conversation for another time, but what you can do is go learn about what money really is, and what sound money, not just money, but sound money. That is difference between a fiat currency, which is the dollar, the euro, paper money that has backed by nothing and is printed and printed and printed. It causes inflation. So people don't understand actually what inflation is. Inflation is the printing of money that's backed by nothing. And when all those dollars go into circulation, it's creating inflation, because all those dollars are competing for the same goods. And government spending. Okay, those are the two main reasons that cause inflation. Mm-hmm. But Bitcoin, I love to talk about Bitcoin.
Go for it.
So there are Bitcoin's right. This is also creative enterprise. So we're talking about creative enterprise. Sound money that's what goes into that system, right? Mm-hmm. And so there are three, gold, silver, and Bitcoin are currently three of the only currencies that are commodities and will continue to always hold value. Now, I understand people confuse crypto and Bitcoin. They're two completely different things. Cryptocurrency there's many of them. We just saw a horrible thing that happened with that, and people lost millions and millions of dollars, billions of dollars. That is not money. Bitcoin is the only cryptocurrency that's actually money. And so, books that you can read, the Bitcoin Standard, you could go learn from Mark Moss, Michael Saylor. There's just so many people that you can go actually learn from. And so that's why I talk about self-actualized intelligence, right? Because you're increasing your intelligence. And once you understand how money works and how our global financial system works, all you start to understand all these other systems that don't work for us, right? That's kind of the start. That was the start for me. And it's like it's this global awakening that we are being lied to, we're being manipulated, we're being stolen from, our wealth is being transferred from us away, to them, right? The people that create the systems. That's why it's so necessary, and I can go on and on about it, but that's so necessary to learn and educate ourselves. And this is that due diligence. This is not about going and doing a Google search and looking at Wikipedia. This is studying.
That's not due diligence.
Studying with experts. These, economics, learning about economics, learning about finance from these people who are their passion is educating, which is right currently what we are trying to do now that we're not worried about money anymore. We've got the relationship, we've got all these things, and we're being the person that we've always wanted to be. Now our purpose is to help other people. That's what I wanted to come back to, right? Like that's what our purpose is to now help other people achieve the same thing, to experience life on a whole new level, to basically wield it to work for you, right? I came from a very poverty consciousness upbringing. I had to completely, that whole hypnotic rhythm thing, I had to create an entire new hypnotic rhythm for myself. I had to understand that, there's the practical real life understanding of money, and then there's the energetic understanding of money, right? Which is just that it's a flow of energy back and forth, right, between source and ourselves. And that can be accomplished.
It can be,
accomplished.
and we're both. I mean, I'm just shining as you're saying this, because this is the thing, is there's nothing more joyful than supporting others to get through the challenges you've been through, and to support them to do that, right? And it's like, I came from extreme poverty consciousness as well. Like, I have a lot of victim stories around me in my bloodlines, you know, and I literally stand there shining my light going, hey, there is another way, but you can't force anyone else to change. You just live your life by example and do your best to kind of bring the principles that I feel we align with into everything we do. Like, this is part of our journey, right? Is that we're always walking our talk. We are literally, as we've heard some of our, you know, mentors say, we are the brand, and by being the brand, we're actually the living embodiment of what we talk about. We don't talk one thing and do another. The two are totally congruent. When you're talking about money and you're talking about Bitcoin, I'd love, you know, I feel like this is a really important thing for us to expand on, because I've never understood that there is a difference between crypto and Bitcoin, for example. You know, we know there's been a dip in Bitcoin, which has been huge, and that has affected the crypto market. One of the things that I heard recently was that the same whales that destabilize the main, you know, economic system have been doing the same thing with cryptos. Have you got anything to say on that? It's like,
yeah, absolutely. And then you know what they're trying to do, they're going to be using this recent stealing of billions of dollars from everyday people to issue in regulations on cryptocurrency, and then also to create a government-backed cryptocurrency, which would actually be horrible, because then we have zero, right? Our sovereignty will be at stake essentially, right? Where you won't ever be able to purchase anything anonymously anymore. And so Bitcoin is freedom, it's peace, right? Because it's the end of wars. Now, I don't like, right, where we're talking, this is another conversation for another time, but Bitcoin will bring peace to the world. That's what Bitcoin is capable of doing. And it's an exit from the financial system that works for almost nobody. And if you are, you know, we talked about, you know, our savings and protecting our savings. And if you want to protect your savings right now and your wealth right now, get your money into different currencies, gold, silver, Bitcoin, get them into commodities. It just so happens that silver is also a commodity. You know, that's how you protect your wealth, because if all of your assets are in a fiat currency, that it's backed by nothing. And in the history of the world, every fiat currency has gone to zero, every single one. And we don't think, a lot of people don't, they live their lives and we just don't realize that any of that is actually going on over here, right? It's based on trust. We trust our government, we trust our systems, when in fact, we shouldn't be.
I love that you're saying that, and I'm often very curious about how, when we have these kind of conversations on public platforms, like how we get away with them on many levels, right? Because as you said, there's a lot on YouTube that people can educate themselves with. It's not being banned, it's there, right? Because the facts are the facts, right? However, we have all been through something very interesting in the last 3 years, which I'm not even going to give a name to. But one of the very interesting things I discovered through doing my due diligence, i.e. independent research, was the shock factor that many of the doctors that were advising their patients through the last 3 years, and many judges in the judicial system as well, were getting their information from the news, right? And from the main search engines that I'm not even going to say the name of, but starts with G, right? So if the people that we're going to, that we are giving our power away to because they are experts, are actually going to these mainstream I'm not going to say anything other than, you know what I mean, right? To get their information, and they're coming to us and saying, well, in my esteemed opinion, you should be doing X, Y, Z. Isn't that scary? And, you know, yeah, it's the same in the birthing
it
hub.
is.
That's why
Yeah, I mean, because we're giving up our sovereignty.
Yeah.
We're giving up our sovereignty, which is really what is ultimately should be guarded with our lives. You know, it's not just freedom, it's sovereignty.
Yeah.
And we've been kind of given this I guess narrative of sacrificing ourselves for the greater good.
Yeah.
And when in fact we are not meant to do that. We are not meant to sacrifice ourselves for the greater good. We are meant to lead ourselves first and guard that sovereignty. And yes, of course, I don't, you know, of course, you know, I want to be a philanthropist when I grow up. I mean, so I'm not talking about, you know, no, you over there and me over here. That's not what it's about. It's about maintaining our sovereignty and then including, right, that global landscape, the human community to rise together.
Yeah.
But not being controlled to do so.
Yeah, it's not the social pressure, because this is so important for us to all wisen up to. And I love that you said there's a difference between sovereignty and freedom, and I'll come to you for that as a final statement before we wrap up, because I think it's really important for people to understand that there is a difference. But essentially, we've been taught, you know, I feel when part of our journey of moving beyond blame is to recognize that the leaders on this planet right now, the political leaders, the people that are making the decisions on the behalf of the collective, are not very well themselves. They are also influenced by epigenetic trauma, right? And in fact, the people that are most seeking to be powerful and dominate, you could argue, are probably the least well in this current system, right? The ones that are fighting for absolute control and power, which influences the systems that we are currently in. Without, I think it's so important for us to remember, we're not shining the light on the problem and going, look, there's this terrible problem. We're shining the light on the problem and going, hey, this exists, but guess what? There's all this scaffolding being built around it right now that might be invisible to you, but don't freak out, because there's all this stuff that is coming up to create this shift that we are all a part of. So the work that Meaghan's doing with, you know, the Neurobrilliance Institute, the work I'm doing with Starpeace, there's so many of us. That's what these Starpeace talks are about, is seeding this awareness that actually we can totally grow beyond this. But what we have to remember is the martyr wound is in the collective. When we were all told the greater good, we were basically thinking that we were in a service to others' consciousness, but actually we were in a service to self-consciousness, because those who were telling us to do it were seeking to self-serve. It was going to serve them the most, make them the most money, profit the most. Look at what's going on in the newspapers now. I mean, we have, you know, those who were shamed, those who lost their jobs during the last 3 years, coming forward now and writing their memoirs and making a lot of money on basically spilling some truths out into the collective so everyone can re-educate themselves about what really happened. But back in this 3 years of what I would call terror, because it really pushed everyone's fear buttons, we were told, put others first, sacrifice yourself. That's the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. And that is not a service to others agenda. I want to make this really clear, because those of us who are star seeds are here in service to others, right? But part of that journey is making sure you are serving from an overflowing cup. Being in service isn't being a servant, right? There is all these little distinctions that are really important for us to understand, because if you are giving of your own blood without being able to recharge that blood, well, guess what? You ain't going to be giving for very long, are you? And this is what you talk about. It's what I talk about. It's like, we're here to put our own oxygen mask on, learn to breathe well, and then support others to do the same, right? Because we are in a sustainable and regenerative scenario. But until you are, it's very difficult to affect change. I'll say it's very difficult. I won't say it's impossible, in a way that is truly beneficial in the long term for everybody, right? We're on the same page with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, when you are leading yourself first, you are accessing those higher levels of consciousness, those higher levels of being. So yeah, right. We're talking about beingness, and there's no fear.
Yeah.
There's no fear in that place, and so you can lead yourself. You can lead your family. You can lead your community. You can, right, and on and on and on.
Mm.
Um, but if you are operating from a place of fear, there you can't access your intuition. You can't access those higher levels of thinking and those higher levels of being.
Mm.
And so then therefore you end up sacrificing yourself
Mm.
and then regretting it. I mean, as you can see, a lot of people have regrets, and that's because they didn't listen to themselves,
Mm.
right? So that's where that sovereignty begins. It begins with leading yourself,
Yeah.
in order to then go on and lead the world.
And if you know, this has been something I've heard quite a lot in those who are awakening, is this belief that we're all just going to be self-governing, therefore we won't need leadership. And that's I feel a misinterpretation of what's happening, because yes, we're all reclaiming our sovereignty. That is the name of the game, if you like, of the new earth, is that we're trusting our inner authority over giving our power away to others. It's a big shift. However, that doesn't mean that, you know, we're self-leading, we're autonomous, but we also want to bring in those that we know are experts in areas that can support us to thrive, to lead us in that. We're not expecting each and every one of us to be an expert in everything. I'm not an expert in what you're an expert in. You're not an expert in what I'm an expert in. We have these areas that kind of unite, aren't they, our common ground, where we get really excited, and then we go, wow, I'd love to learn more about what you do with that, and oh, I'd love to learn more about what you do. So there's still a need for leadership, and it's not going to be all the women are leading and the men are not. It's not going to be this division thing. It's about bringing it into this space of congruence, of allowing, the way I see it is recognizing that we are each individual, unique droplets in this huge ocean that is source, all that is, right? We're all that little individual one. And if you don't yet know about service to self versus service to others' agendas, look it up, do some research around it. Just go beyond the usual search engines, right? Like, see what else comes up, because, you know, again, there are trigger words we just avoid using when we're having these conversations. But, you know, the idea that there is a they, right? You can even look at and go, well, that's the shadow element of me being expressed in the world and projected. And then there's a very real they, one could say, that, you know, has accumulated on this physical earth as a result of a long, long time of the shadow aspect of our consciousness not being addressed. Now, let's bring this back to what I asked you a moment ago, which is the difference between sovereignty and being sovereign and being free. How would you describe that to everybody?
Oh, wow, that's a big question. Well, I mean, you know, when we think of freedom, we think about freedom, free speech, and, you know, those kinds of body autonomy, making decisions for our body that are our own. And that, I mean, that kind of goes into sovereignty too. But
Mm.
I mean, I guess sovereignty for me comes back to that leadership of self,
Mm.
um, uh, and money,
Mm.
sovereign, sound money,
Mm.
and learning what, of course, what I mentioned earlier, and learning what that really means and what that really is, so that you are safe in the world. You're
Mm.
safe and you're secure in the world, and you're experiencing life on your own terms.
Mm.
I think that's really what sovereignty is about. It's experiencing life on your own terms, and not just experiencing it, but creating it, creating the experience that you want to have here. That, you know, that's right here at our fingertips. Like, we absolutely can do that.
Mm.
And so for me, being sovereign is very much about that, you know, that autonomy. But that part of that autonomy is is about money,
Mm.
and autonomous, trustless money, which is Bitcoin. Because remember what I was saying about, we have to trust. We have the US dollar, for example, rules the world economy. And it's based on trust in our system, trust in our government, and those kinds of things. But as we all know, there is corruption, and there, you know, right? But in a trustless, decentralized system, which is Bitcoin, right? We don't have to, there's no trusting anyone. And that's sovereignty, right? So that's that autonomy and that freedom to be who we are. And experiencing life as we determine that we're going to experience it. That is absolutely, I mean, I had to come to this place. I was caught up, you know, in fear and trauma and all those things, and that poverty consciousness, which, you know, those things are created. So if those things can be created, then sovereignty and freedom and autonomy, prosperity and innovation and creative enterprise also can be, and living on your own terms can be created.
This is the music to my ears, because this is when you sort of see Rozy off camera, what you see is, why is everyone talking about dystopias all the time? Why is everyone talking about the problem? Why is everyone talking about the solution? And that's why I wanted to, you know, create Starpeace and work with it as an energy, because we need now way more energy going into what would our idea of, you know, what would my idea of a utopia look like? What would your idea of a utopia look like? Let's discuss our ideas around utopias. Let's have more conversations about how it could be even better than that. Let's look at what systems we have in place right now on this earth that can support us to go from where we are to where we want to be, right? So we know there's a problem, we're accepting it, we're not projecting it. We're not resisting it. We're not hiding it, but we're going, okay, this is my inspiration for something else, because I don't want this. And as we're growing in our awareness around freedom, I love that you spoke about freedom of speech, because it's one thing to just want to be able to go, I'll just say what I want whenever I want, and that's it. That doesn't actually really align with being sovereign, in my opinion, because you're not also considering the impact of your words, of your actions on others, on the collective, on the environment. And part of us growing and maturing in consciousness is being aware that actions have consequences, right? So whether it's reducing our carbon footprint, whether it's, you know, whatever the measurement is for being a good person on this earth, or a conscious person, ultimately we could say, do no harm, right? Our intention is to walk as lightly as we can on this earth and minimize what trauma we create moving forward, right? Bearing in mind that we can't walk this earth without disturbing it on some level, right? We are here to be agents of change. That's an important part of this. But like, I remember listening, I can't remember who it was I was talking to, but someone, it might have been Tara, was talking about the Dalai Lama. The Dalai Lama eats meat, and it's like, oh my God, the Dalai Lama eats meat. And it's like, yeah, it's the least non-violent thing he can do, because his body needs meat. Whereas not to eat it would be violent to his body. So he takes care of himself first, and then the next level and the next level. And, you know, whilst we're all wanting to kill each other, and this is the irony of it, for eating meat or killing a life, you know, all this stuff that we measure things by, isn't it again about actually accepting death as part of the process of life, but actually minimizing suffering? Isn't that what we're kind of growing towards, and being aware that surface level and deeper level can have different results when we dig and we dig and we dig? What I would love, my darling Meaghan, is we're going to make sure that everyone has access to you and how they can contact you. And we definitely need a part 2 to this, which I feel the starting point of it is prosperity for all. So we're going to tie it back into the Institute of Neurobrilliance, but then really take it more in a tangent towards the stuff you love talking about around money. For that, yeah, that
yeah,
good?
awesome. Yeah, I'd love that. Thank you.
So, beautiful souls, I really hope you got excited about, well, just us chatting and what this has awakened in you, because these are awakening conversations. They are activations in themselves. Remember that Meaghan's links will be available. My links are available if you would like to talk to me as well about all the wonderful work that RozyGlow offers. And you know, I just want to leave you with this idea that if there are any questions that have come about, or anything that has, yeah, maybe really expanded you, or something that has felt challenging to accept, please comment, right? We'd love to know more about what's going on for you as you hear these conversations, because it really spurs the next conversation on. And my passion is rewriting the narrative from what is to what do we want it to be. You know, like if we can all start using that more and more, that is what starpeace consciousness is about. So my dear sister, you're in Canada, right?
I'm in Colorado.
You're in Colorado. Sorry.
Colorado. Yeah.
You're in Colorado. I'm just so grateful you've taken the time to speak with me today. It's been lovely. At the time that we're recording this, the moon is super full in Gemini, and I feel like Neurobrilliance is literally like the evolution, if you like, of what can happen with the mind, which is the locking us into these old ways. And I was talking about psychic attack earlier this week, and how that is both our own self-attacking thoughts, but also the attacking conversations we have in our minds with others that we don't actually speak out loud necessarily, but it's the argument you have in your head, right, that then sends arrows out. And how lovely is it to make your mind your friend, not your enemy? Because we're not here to go, it's the mind or the heart. We're here to let the mind entrain, well, the brain entrain with the heart. So the mind is everything it can be. It can be brilliant. And I feel like you are doing such a huge thing for that emerging in the world today. Is there anything else you would like to say to everyone before we say goodbye?
I think just to go off of that is like, yeah, we can, you can experience life however you want to experience life. Like that there's a whole other way of living in the world. And that is exiting that the narratives of fear and trauma, and that we don't belong, and that we don't know why we're here, and all those things, that those are really just not true. That those are ultimately lies that we don't need to live by anymore. We can be whoever we want to be. We can create whatever we want to create, and it can happen faster than ever thought possible. And really to fight for that. Like, so if you're in a place of fear or feeling, that you don't belong, or any kind of stuckness or anything at all, like, please reach out. Well, first of all, because the other side of that is so much closer than you ever thought possible. And it doesn't take years, it doesn't take months anymore. It can just happen, and you can be healed and whole and living the life of your dreams, all areas of your life. And then just that goes out to all the other people in your life. And so then you are basically changing other people's lives as a result of changing your own. That's sovereignty. That's leading yourself first.
That's leading yourself, that's being the example, being the change you want to see in the world. So what a beautiful place to end it. Thank you, sweetheart. Looking forward to part 2. And yeah, really grateful for this beautiful conversation. I found it really nurturing and nourishing and inspiring. So thank you so much. And thank you for everyone who has been actively listening and energizing this co-creation, because it's all part of starpeace. So much love to you all, and we will see you in the next installment. Take care for now.